Welcome back to a Boxscore Geeks show. We've got a lot of fun topics in store for tonight. Most shows we don't actually have a topic ahead of time, a show title. Tonight we actually do. We're going to call it Small Sample Size Theater. So we're going to definitely be talking the horrendous Lakers, the amazing Klay Thompson, and where the heck are the Cavaliers? More of that in store for you tonight. I'm Dre Alvarez, aka Nerd Numbers, and with me as always is the voice of God, our amazing producer Brian Foster. You can find him on the Twitters as @BoxScoreBrian. Give a shout out, Brian.
Oh, thanks, Dre. And I love the idea you had for the show tonight. I usually just like to joke around about how early in the season it is, but you've actually found a smart way to approach it, so I think it's going to be a good show.
Yeah, we'll see how much credit I should get for it, but I do normally know, or at least I like a topic when we have the emails back and forth, they actually go back and forth. There are times when we're discussing show topics where it's kind of dead on arrival. Like we'll say as Tori, we have to talk about, but no one really cares. This is one that got a lot of us going, so I'm excited to talk about it. Now, before we get started, as you know, every week on the show, I give a poll. The problem is most times I give a poll, I have a reason that usually relates to something I've said in the show. So if I'm talking Klay Thompson versus Kyle Korver, the poll will be Klay versus Kyle Korver. Last week's poll I had in mind before the show, but then forgot to ever bring it up, which was Twizzlers versus Red Vines. So Dante Bosco, I'll include his Twitter avatar, he was on Avatar, in the show notes if Brian doesn't get it up in time. But he actually had a tweet about a late night discussion about Twizzlers versus Red Vines. I thought that was hilarious. I think Dante Bosco is one of the coolest people ever. His guest appearance on the Nostalgia Critic just made my day. So I wanted to use that as a survey, but then I didn't mention it in the show, but I still wanted to put it up. So that's why that was last week's poll. I promise this week's poll will actually be related to something we discuss. All right. So with that, I'm going to jump straight in. Before we even talk any news, our first topic is actually about the idea of sample size. So at the beginning of the season, everything's in flux, everything's in chaos. The NBA actually looks like football. As I mentioned, Klay Thompson right now looks like the MVP. The Lakers look like the worst team in the history of the NBA. And when people talk about this online, it will get some statistical people going. And then they will say small sample size. And I'm of mixed emotion here. Because when people talk about stat nerds taking all the fun out of sports, I get very incredulous because just because you're a stat nerd and you look at the numbers does not mean you're taking away anything from the game. In fact, in many cases, you're, adding to it because I'm able to look at the box score and replay and know the reason the Detroit Pistons won was because Dennis Rodman was amazing, or the reason this game was actually close was because of all the forced turnovers. That adds to my enjoyment, and it shouldn't take anything away from you just because I change the narrative. I may change what the narrative is. For instance, Michael Jordan was not the MVP in his 1998 first or second retirement season. That's a different narrative, but that doesn't stop the fact that there are great narratives to be had in sports. But I am actually getting annoyed at some stat nerds at the start of the season when it comes to telling people to stop overreacting about small sample size. Because I honestly think that discussing sports is part of the fun of sports. We're all sports fans. And if we made the comment, you're not allowed to actually have discussions on results of games until we have a large enough sample size, what you would basically say is to all football fans, you're not allowed to talk about football at all. Just sit down. No talking about football, we'll never get a sample size. The way I'll couch that is, I do think when you discuss small sample size stuff, you have to basically look at stats that are relevant, kind of not go crazy with inferences, and you can have fun with that. So I have no problem with people shooting people down for using wrong stats. I do have a problem when someone like myself goes on Twitter and says, Klay Thompson is currently the best player in the NBA, and the response is, small sample size. Well, yeah, of course. But the point of this discussion was to have fun. It's kind of like watching an episode of Game of Thrones and talking about it the next day. That's the formula of the conversation. That's how we're enjoying the conversation. You're just being someone that's entering the conversation without kind of realizing the purpose of it and saying, your conversation is dumb. And that bugs me. I think, Brian, when you started the show, you had an XKCD up about Rock Band versus playing real guitar. I'll put that in quotes.
Oh yeah, it's been up for most of the show.
And that's the same point is when people enter discussions where I'm excited about an amazing game Clay Thompson has and they go small sample size, they're missing the point of the discussion. The discussion is I want to talk the game that just happened. I probably realize that it's not the norm. And in fact, usually when someone accentuates a stat in a game, what they're actually saying is this is abnormal. So, for instance, LeBron James' first game was terrible. When I bring that up and you say small sample size, well, I wouldn't be talking about LeBron James. I don't even know what he did his first game. I'm going to try and type subtly, but he started this season off horrendously. I think he went scoreless in the second half, if I recall. I'm bringing that up because it's abnormal, and that's fine. And then usually what you'll see me doing, and this is the right way to do it, is you look at the small sample size and you can make inferences on it. And some of those inferences can be silly, where you can say, if LeBron James has 10 turnovers every game this season, the Cavaliers are not going to make the playoffs. Well, that's unlikely. One of our topics that we'll get into is Klay Thompson, and this hits a more gray area. And I was actually curious if you had anything to add on that, Brian, because I know we had a lot of discussion. You've actually let me go for a while. In the show notes, I'm going to give away behind the scenes footage to people listening and watching. I actually gave Brian a note that he was supposed to be hammering me with questions during the segment. So Brian has let me go. He's given me the green light to just shoot away like Kobe, I guess.
Yeah, I did. I guess I've been producing in the background. Actually, most of what I have is for Clay, so I'm ready to move on to Clay. I don't know if there's anything specific about sample sizes you want to get into.
I see. You want to talk sample size, but you're waiting for the Clay discussion.
Yeah,
they are
that's
related.
right, son. That's right.
That is acceptable. But yeah, by the way, LeBron's first game, he went 5 for 15 from the field, 8 turnovers, horrendous game. His second game,
cut that guy from the team. What a terrible signing.
Exactly. Cut him. Trade him for Clay Thompson, right? See if they'll say yes to a trade.
No, just the only thing I have to say about this is when you're talking about stats in relation to sports, you just need to be deliberate and careful about what you're saying. So if you want to say these 3 games from Clay, and as we're talking right now, they just began their 4th game against the Clippers, so
I'm going to have that on in the background, so I apologize. I'm going to be a
viewers will know what the result of that game, but as we're speaking right now, they're 3-0. So if you're going to say, well, based on these 3 games, that's max extension was justified. Clay is one of the best players. Then we can have a conversation about small sample size. But then to your point, if we're going to say, man, he's had a great start to the season. He's been one of the best players so far. I hope he keeps it up, or I hope he doesn't, or whatever. Those are 2 different statements, and we just have to be careful about them. That's all my thoughts are.
And let's definitely go into Clay on that note. So as Arturo and I mentioned, we actually did some work for Basketball Breakdown about Klay Thompson versus Wesley Matthews. And the basic point we have about Clay, and this has been what we've seen his career, is that Klay Thompson has been an amazing 3-point shooter his entire career, doesn't do much else, and has really bad shot selection with the rest of his shots. So basically, if Klay Thompson, if this was Major League Baseball, if he was a designated hitter and he could learn to stop striking out, he'd be an amazing designated hitter. As is, though, he's been a below average player. And anybody that says Klay Thompson's been an above average player before this season, and as a result, they've known he was worth the money, like you were saying, that discussion we can just shut down and say, look, either you can say Klay Thompson is amazingly talented and we think he will get better, or you can say Klay Thompson's been great, and that's where I'll disagree. But you can't kind of try and conjoin them together to now explain his current performance, which is outworldly compared to his previous season. So Arturo and I, for Basketball Breakdown, basically looked at Klay, and we had a very common basic thread that we've talked about before, which is to say Klay Thompson is probably one of the best 3-point shooters in the history of the NBA. And the issue he has, though, is he is just absolutely in love with these mid-range jumpers. And as a result, he basically eats away most of the goodwill his scoring is doing. And then if you factor in the rest of his game, I'm not going to give you as much defense as you want. Even if you made Klay one of the best defenders in the league, he would basically be just about average over the last couple seasons.
Sneak preview, though, I will defend his defense later on, Dre. Keep going.
Oh, all right. We'll see. I'll probably argue. But basically, we have this beautiful chart. I don't know if you have it in front of us, but we've got how Klay shoots from short, mid-range, long two, et cetera. And basically, Klay is just in love with the mid-range. You compare Klay to Wesley Matthews, Wesley Matthews is much more reserved. You compare Clay to league average, he basically shoots twice as many mid-range jumpers as league average. So that should tell you right there. And unfortunately, the problem he has there is he's just about average in shooting efficiency for mid-range. And that's the worst shot you can take, and he takes a lot of them. Now, this season gets really interesting. So Clay has played 3 games. The first game Clay played, and man, I love you, ESPN, but their URLs make it really hard to know against. They played against the Kings. And this was a bad game for Klay Thompson, and it's what I would call Clay Classic. Basically, Clay actually had a bad game because he missed a lot of three-pointers. He took 7 3-point shots. He missed 6 of them. He took 4 or 5 mid-range jumpers and only 3 shots from inside the paint. So as you can see, he took a lot of mid-range shots, a lot of threes. The problem was his threes weren't falling, so it was a bad game. But that's the Clay we've been used to. Now then in game 2 against the Lakers, this was just something we haven't seen before, kind of. That's a spoiler too. We'll get to that in a second. Where basically Klay Thompson did 2 things. He basically shot inside of the paint or shot from 3. He only took, I believe, I'm looking at the chart right now, Brian, he only took 1 mid-range shot. And you're like,
Actually, sorry, I was highlighting it right now. The one from the bottom, right in the third quarter.
yeah. And then finally, and by the way, I hope the train going on, I actually live next to some train tracks, so you might be able to hear that in the background. It might be why you see me vibrating.
You sound pristine right now.
Awesome. I did add soundproofing to some of the office. Maybe we'll show a sneak preview of that later. And then in the third game, which was against Portland, Clay took 8 shots from inside of the paint, 8 shots from 3, and then 6 mid-range jumpers. So basically now you have a kind of interesting hybrid where Clay is taking most of his shots from the paint and from the 3. A quote I heard from Dean Oliver when I talked to him was, basketball is a game of layups and threes. So basically Clay doing that right. So we kind of have, as I mentioned before in the pre-show, we have like a small, medium, large. We have against the Lakers, that kind of shot selection from Clay will mean would be a great scorer this season and a really good player. The game against Portland, that's really good shot selection. That probably means he's a good player. And the first game against Sacramento, that's bad Clay. That probably means he's a bad player. So the issue, so I actually will agree with small sample size theater here. I, like many others, have just been extremely excited about Klay Thompson these first 3 games because my entire point, his entire career is Klay Thompson is a $1 million arm, 10-cent head player. His shot selection just depresses the heck out of me, and I've said if he would just get rid of this mid-range shot, he would be a great player. And that might be happening, but in 3 games, we can't say it. So that's why I'm saying I'm couching it. If Klay Thompson's shot selection improves, then Klay Thompson will be a very good player this season. And then by extension, if everything else goes right for the Warriors, then the Warriors will have an even better year. Boom. That's being able to do both small sample size, zoom in on the game, make sure you don't take too much away from it, and then add extension. So that's my point on Clay. To your point, Brian, this was the note you gave. He's currently got a 74.3 true shooting percentage. That's basically 10 to 15% better than even the best players achieve. So that's unlikely. It's unlikely that he's going to keep that up. And as you mentioned, he's basically average in all of his other stuff. He's basically just doing what he's been doing for his entire career. Which, so by the way, to the point, unfortunately, even with this Klay Thompson resurgence, I'd still take Kevin Love over Clay because Kevin Love's shooting efficiency is great, even with a few first games, and his rebounding is amazing. So basically, Kevin Love does all this scoring that Klay Thompson is currently doing and more. So even in the event that Clay turns his life around, becomes a good shooter, I will still say it was bad not to take the Kevin Love trade. So on that, do you have anything to add? And then I actually want to go back in time on Klay Thompson.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's do that first, and then I'll talk afterwards.
Okay, so the other thing to mention, and a few smart people, including Dave Barry and Patrick, have brought up that Klay Thompson started last season really well as well. And this is true. He had 3 really good games, which I've highlighted. And the first game actually was against the Lakers as well. He had an amazing game against the Lakers. The difference in this game was that Clay had a really, really good game for mid-range. He took like 6 or 7 mid-range shots and made, I think, 6 out of 7. And the issue there is that's not sustainable, right? That was bad shot selection, but he had a lights-out game. Now, then his second game of the season, which I believe was it also against Sacramento? It was against Sacramento. It's like the same cast of characters. It was against Sacramento. it looked very much the same as what we're talking this year. It was new and improved Klay, where Klay Thompson in that game only took 3 mid-range jumpers, took 6 points from the paint, and then took like, wow, he made a really long three in that game too. And then he took like 8 shots from what the heck? It's I guess Ben McLemore.
56 footer, you call that one long? Yeah, I guess that
But
was
it
pretty
says
long.
Ben McLemore. That's really weird. Oh, so that's not Klay. That's a Ben
Oh, you
McLemore
know what the
three.
problem is? The Sacramento color and the Golden State color are very similar on this page. You
Yeah,
see
so
what I
it's
mean?
an
They look almost the same color.
yeah. Okay, so Klay did not take a ridiculously stupid 3-point shot. That was Ben McLemore, and it went in. But no. So basically, Klay had the new and improved. And then the third game Klay played that was really well last season, I think, was against the Timberwolves. And in that game, it was more of a hybrid, like I was mentioning, similar to Klay Thompson's third game this season against Portland, where he took a lot of in paint shots in the paint, although he missed 4 out of 5, 4 out of 7 of them. Sorry. So he missed most of those, but he took a lot of shots in the paint, a lot of threes, and then a tempered amount of mid-range jumpers. So basically, the annoying problem with Klay is we've seen this before. We've seen 3 different faces in a very hot start, which he's also got going on right now. Last I checked on the current game, but Klay was doing badly with just a foul, but it looks like that game is heated up. So how is Klay Thompson doing? He is currently the worst shooter in the league with 0 for 1. I mean, that kind of efficiency is just not going to get you anywhere. Hope it's obvious that's sarcastic. And he's got 2 fouls, so I think he's probably out of the game. So for this show, we're probably not going to have any idea as to how Klay's shooting is going to be for the game, as he has only taken 1 shot. And let's see if ESPN Shot Chart has updated this. So thus far, Klay Thompson's 1 shot this game. He's taken 2 shots this game. Odd. Oh, no, he's just taken one. It was in the paint. So there you go. Klay has taken 1 shot. It was in the paint. I guess amazing shot selection. Bad game. We'll have to see how that turns out. So end results. I'm excited about Klay like everybody else. I totally understand people saying don't take too much away from this. I still don't think that means you're allowed to say don't talk about Klay. And the final note, unfortunately, though, is after all this running back and forth about can we talk small sample size? Should we take too much? What are you allowed to say? My end result is we have no idea on Klay Thompson, but I actually kind of like that because sports like baseball and basketball go so long that we kind of get a really good idea as to who teams and players are. So I love the beginning of the season where we have this, sense of hope that we may not know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a lot of mixed feelings for Warriors fans right now about Klay, at least those who know that he's not actually the best player in the league, which he has been potentially these first few games. But the way I'll put it is it's sort of like, we just had the election last night, and what the smart pollsters were saying before the election was, with the way all these races are, the Republicans are just going to take the Senate no matter what, right? Because the Democrats had to win every single close race to do it. It just wasn't there. And I think it's the same thing with Klay. And the question is, will he live up to this max contract? And of course, that Halloween night,
has he been offered a max contract yet? I thought they were still in discussions.
it was offered and accepted. 4
Holy
years
cow,
for
okay.
the max, yeah. So this is the lens I'm looking through right now is, God, we're starting on Halloween, disaster, the most ghoulish, devilish Halloween possible. Klay signs the 4-year. And I will throw in a technicality. Apparently, the Warriors may have put one over on Klay and his agent, and it's a max deal for this year. And it can't be expanded to next year. So it's the 15 point whatever number. So It's sort of a max, sort of not. But anyway, that doesn't matter to this point.
Okay.
What matters is look at all these different things that has to happen for him to actually get to that contract.
Oh, by the way, and I'm looking up an article on the contract, and it starts so well because they're mad at the contract, and then they fall apart because then they yell at Andrew Bogut and Andre Iguodala for flaming out in the first round of the playoffs. So they start so well with good analysis and then immediately go to small sample size.
Yeah, it's tough to find that, but I've just got his numbers up right here, and like to what you were saying earlier, that's really where it's all coming from. Is he's shooting 45 from 3. He maybe can keep that up, but because he has shot between 40 and 42 for most of his career, but where it's really coming from is this 59% from 2, whereas he's never shot even close to 50 in the past. So
And he's fine. And I mean, the question is this shot selection for real? Is Klay
that's
gonna
right.
keep? And I mean that the one nice part about Clay in this case with his other stats, like you mentioned, is when Chris Paul gets a triple double, which he did the other night, it is not logical for any fan in their right mind to assume that Chris Paul is going to get 10 rebounds a night. He's a very good rebounder for a guard. I think he gets like 4 or 5, but it is foolish to assume he would suddenly double the amount of rebounds he's averaged his entire career. That's just not sustainable. So with Clay, though, if we go, okay, well, the shooting efficiency is not sustainable. He's not going to shoot 74% for the season. But if his shot selection improves and Clay Thompson goes up to 60% for the season, he's actually a good player. So the question is, can he keep that up? And like I said, the annoying
But is he a
answer.
max player? And that's where it's tough. So here's
Okay, so you argue defense. I want to let you get your looks in here because I still don't know it.
well, here's the point I teased earlier about his defense. So it's this isn't the best overlay. It's kind of small in here for the viewers, but I'll just say he's got 2.3 steals per 48 or 36, whatever this scale is on this page here. He's never come close to that in the past. So Clay's defense, if he can keep those steals up, that is a box score measurable defensive stat that we know matters in the game. So that's one thing. The other big thing is 10.4 free throws attempted per game is pretty good. He's been around 3 for his first 3 years. So if he keeps going, and this comes back to your shot selection point, right?
Yeah, I don't. One thing that there are a few things missing from the box score, and or even just play by play, or from the stats that are kept, drive me nuts. And I'll just let. Thank you for letting me go off on a rant for a second here.
Let's do it.
I hate the fact that the shot clock is not kept. So the game clock and the play by play is kept, but the shot clock is not, and that is information that is hugely valuable to knowing if a player took a bad shot, or if they took a shot coming with the free throw or with the shot clock winding down. And even more of that, I want to know the answer to the question, how often is the shot clock actually a factor in shot selection? The other one that just absolutely drives me mad is we don't know where players are fouled when they take free throws currently. I think the sports tracking has that, but I don't think it's easily available. And so that's one question I've always had is, what is the foul rate at in the paint, mid-range, three-point shots? Because I'm willing to bet mid-range shots are one of the worst ones because not only are they low percentage and, teams take too many, but I also think they're probably fouls are called less on them. But I don't know the numbers and I don't know where Clay's getting fouled.
Yeah, those are good points. And in fact, I kind of come across similar trouble in the pre-show when we were looking at Basketball Reference 3 to 10 range. We were talking about, well, how should we consider those shots? So yeah, there's all kinds of trouble. And
what I will say is nylon calculus, when they start updating the shot charts, and ESPN does have shot charts, which we've been showing throughout the show, you can look up that data. It's not as easy as I would like, but it's look upable. Whereas, like, I will never be able to know, did Carmelo Anthony take 5 shots because time was running out and he had to take a shot, or did he take those early in the shot clock, not shot chart? And you can infer some of that, but the problem is, for instance, the clock is allowed to run before the ball is inbounded. The shot clock starts when the ball is inbounded.
Yeah, that's a tough one to figure out. But now my final thoughts on Clay are just that if he can keep up those things he's never done before, all the free throws and the steals, and then somehow pick up rebounds or assists, I don't know. It seems really tough for him to get there, but man, we'll take what we can get. That's all. That's it.
The free throw, I mean, again, you don't need Clay to keep this up. And in fact, he's not going to. Let's spoil the party for everybody else. I'll put $100
ruining my dreams, Dre. Ruining my dreams.
That Clay Thompson will not maintain 10 free throws per 48. I believe that's the stat. And 70 plus shooting for the rest of the season. If you want to take those bets, let me know. And then let me know what other bets you want to take, because why would you ever take that bet? But that said, if he can just get to, like I said, if he can get to 60% true shooting and 5 free throws a game, well, there you go. So, if he can improve, and we're seeing things that might indicate that it is plausible he is going in that direction, but at 3 games, no clue is the answer.
So here's my real last point on Clay. Let's look at a more high-level view. Let's say you're Joe Lacob running the Warriors. Can you spend all that money on guards, basically? You've already got Curry and Iguodala, who are much better players than Clay, at steal bargain contracts, but those are still $10 million plus contracts. So then can you really have, almost $40 million? It's like $38 million 40 million tied up in those three guards. You need to spend money on big men, right? So I still think it's a bad move no matter how you slice it. Even if he gets halfway there, like you were saying, and gets to point 0.2, 0.25 wins per 48, seems impossible for him to get there. And even if he does, I don't know if that's a max player.
So let's be careful with this, and this is something in other areas I've slowly started to move towards, which is trying to make predictions the further out you're going just leads to folly. So let's point just a few things out to your question.
Set me right on this.
Okay, so can he afford to spend the money on Clay? First off, we no longer have to worry about Arturo's guessing as to the salary cap going up. We know that's going to happen. And if a player is not on a max contract deal, like you were saying, Iguodala is probably going to be overpriced at some point in the near future on his contract.
Due to his age, right?
Due to his age. But the advantage is, because it's not a max deal, when the salary cap takes a bump, he's not going to kill them with that contract. And so there will be more money for the Warriors to have, and the Warriors are in a good market, got some good players, so they'll probably be able to attract players. But we don't know. In regards to Clay's contract and that thing, we don't know how they're going to sit in a few seasons. It may be possible that they can steal a really good, think of, say, a Tyson Chandler-like player or Kenneth Faried or whatever.
Zach Lowe is saying Kevin Durant is the one he thinks they should go for.
Oh, Kevin. Well, I mean, I always kind of roll my eyes at those, not because it's a bad point, but it's like there are the obvious plays in the NBA that are so obvious that I don't care about the analysis when they are so far from being anywhere close to real, right? Kevin too. Kevin Durant is still in his contract with the Thunder. The Thunder are going to have first dibs at him, right? So it's just entirely possible this entire story goes, and Kevin Durant signs max deal with the Thunder, never even hits free agency. Once he hits free agency, there's still a lot of other moves. So those, I'm like,
he got me talking about it. That was his goal, right?
There you go. All right. I guess that's true. But all I'm saying is it's possible they'll luck into a really good power forward or center that's underpriced and they can keep the team together. We don't know yet. The other part is that he's probably got a tradable contract, meaning he's a young player that scores a lot of points and people love that. And it's not a bad thing to keep assets. That's one area where I find, I'll call myself on this, where I get like Kobe Bryant's overpriced. It's kind of like the idea of floor spacing in general. The idea of floor spacing, which people say players like Clay do, is these players will take mid-range shots, but that's a good thing because it stretches the D and that leads to better shots for their teammates. Well, that's kind of true, but for that to be true, the player actually needs to take the assist. That's why LeBron James, I will call a floor spacer. He will actually force the defense to move and then he'll pass the ball. That's why Kobe Bryant is not a floor spacer, because he gets the defense to move and then he takes the shot. So with Clay, though, if they've got a really tradable good contract and there's some good assets coming up, like Yipes, I hope you're muted. If you're not, then we just heard Brian.
We're fine. Keep going, Dre.
We just heard Brian cut something in half with a buzzsaw. I guess it was his papers on why Clay will be great. But, they didn't do it with, for instance, Kevin Love, but Klay Thompson could be an asset to trade for a better player. Now, they should have done that already. They made a mistake. But if Kevin Durant wants to leave and they've got Klay Thompson, they can make the contracts work or whatever. So it's hard to know if that's a bad move, but it's very much like spacing the floor. It's only bad if they don't capitalize on the opportunity it grants them. So if Klay Thompson has a really good contract they can trade in the future and they do it, fantastic. They were right to keep for the money. The reason I'll call them a mistake when you said, can they justify spending all that money? The reason they can't, the only reason they can't, and by the way, the ship has sailed, is because they passed on getting Kevin Love instead. So that move is indefensible. They can't justify having made that move. But now with Kevin Love having sailed, signing Clay may turn out to work very well for them. Who knows?
Yeah, and I think everything we just said kind of all agrees with that. I don't think that he ever can actually, his production can live up to that contract. But I do think that what you said is right. When the cap goes way up with the new deal, he could be perceived as a good asset, and that could lead him to being a valuable asset. Fair enough. However, the real point, and this is my real final point on Clay, is that my real final point is, as a fan, the series of events of how they handled the alleged Love trade, if it's all true, we don't know, it was all rumors, and then the subsequent maxing of Clay for 4 years, to me, even though they're in a good position now, and if Arturo was their GM, they'd be in great shape. They could trade Clay and do a lot of good stuff with them. But the real point is, those two moves have just solidified in the minds of Warriors fans. Well, this is kind of a mediocre ownership group. It's not the dream ownership group we hoped it was. Good team. They're going to have a good record this year. They could win the West, but suspect moves.
Yeah, and if they win the West, a lot of that's going to be luck. Obviously, one of the teams we might talk a little bit about is the Thunder, who just, are being decimated. And so there was a thing I talked about way back where I talked about Zach Randolph and predictions. And I basically pointed out Zach Randolph for the Memphis Grizzlies back in the day was an amazing contract signing in that he turned into a really productive player and vaulted them back into, contention status. But if we look at that deal at the time they made it, it was a horrendously stupid deal. And Clay could end up in the same boat, right? Where long term, they win a title with Clay on the team, or they win a title because they trade Clay for Durant. And you go, wow, what an amazing deal. And then you just go, wait a minute, this was luck, right? Why did this actually happen? We lucked out, right? Clay played way out of his mind, way better than we expected. So, yeah, I mean, as a result, I agree with you there, though. I'm unimpressed with the ownership group, and it's kind of depressed me a little in that, a lot of the ownership groups that are Silicon Valley smart in theory just seem to me that they fall into just it seems like they're actually worse than older teams that aren't, smart analytics savvy guys because they fall for it's like they relearn all the same traps that other teams have already unlearned that are good and then behave very much like the mediocre teams that we laugh at regularly. Wow, so a lot on Clay. We actually could have just done Clay, and then what was I thinking? You said something hilarious there. Makes me mad because I've forgotten it. I'll try and remember it in the comments. But you said something that I thought would be a hilarious title, and I've already forgotten it. So with that said, unless you have any more final points, I want to get on to the Lakers at least a little.
Now let's do it.
All right, so looks like the Kobe clutch mythos is going to continue. Arturo had a great tweet today where he pointed out Kobe Bryant got, I think, 39 points on 37 shots last night, and they fell in a close game to the Phoenix Suns. Now, the rest of I'll get the full tweet in front of me and read it out loud. So Arturo said, Kobe scored 39 points from 37 field goal attempts. The rest of the Lakers scored 67 points from 51 field goal attempts. The narrative that it's his teammates' fault somehow, yeah, ... And I mean, this article did happen. I think on Yahoo they said, Lakers fall despite Kobe's 39 points, instead of saying Kobe shot inefficiently and took most of the shots and they lost a close game and probably should have shared the ball more. That said, we're going to see a lot of Kobe shooting, and this is impressively bad right now. The Lakers, I think this is their worst start, it may be ever. I don't know going back through NBA history, and I'll do my best to try and get it up in front of me, but I gotta buy the going starting with 0-5 or whatever. Has got to be one of the worst starts of their career ever. And all I was going to say on that is Kobe Bryant made a comment at one point, we're not this bad. Currently, this Lakers team has a worse point differential, which is the number of points they give up per 100 possessions versus the number of points they score per 100 possessions. You take the difference between those two, that tells you about how strong the team is. They are currently worse than the Charlotte Bobcats in 2012, which you may remember as having the worst win-loss percentage in the history of the NBA. So, wow. When we talk small sample size theater time, this all together, the Lakers are not this bad, but they're not going to be good. They're not going to make the playoffs, which is impressive. Okay, and by the way, actually, I'm looking back at it. Here's what we got. In 1958, the Minneapolis Lakers, who finished with a 19-53 record, started with a 0-7 win-loss record. That is the bar to beat. And they actually started, wow, much worse. Their first game, it looks like they lost by 28 points. So there was a worse Lakers team than this Lakers team at some point in the past. But geez, all right. That's all I have to say on the Lakers there. I did want to talk a little bit about Kobe, which is I don't actually see a problem with him shooting this much. This team, I actually tweeted out today, I said, the Lakers aren't going to make the playoffs. The salary cap's about to explode. If Kobe Bryant wants to get another contract, he needs to keep up the perception that he's a star. And the only way he's going to do that is if he has a high points per game total. If Kobe Bryant suddenly turned into a more selfless, sorry, more selfish is what I'm arguing he should do. If he turned into a more selfless player and saw his points per game drop by 10, rest assured teams wouldn't want to spend as much on him. So if Kobe Bryant wants to get paid again, he needs to shoot. And I don't actually have a problem with this. I actually think Kobe is right for doing it. Kobe, if he can get 40 shots a game, should take 40 shots a game. The only real problem I have with this is that it is bad for the NBA to have a subpar team in Los Angeles. They do have a good team. They do have the Clippers, which is good. If both the Clippers and the Lakers were bad, this would be a horrendous situation for the league. But if the Lakers stay bad, this is a bad thing for the league. They actually want good teams in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. So as fun as it is to make fun of the Knicks for re-signing Melo and losing Chandler, or make fun of the Lakers for being bad, being the worst Lakers since 1958, to make fun of Chicago for Derrick Rose's injury. No one likes that, but you know what I'm saying. It's actually really bad for the league that their teams in Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles are struggling. And they, in terms of what you want the best teams in the biggest markets. The NBA isn't getting that, and that's not a good thing. And that's all I really have on the Lakers. You got anything to say, or do we want to? It's sad. I don't want to kick the Lakers too much while they're down, which sounds weird. I'll kick them all the time when they're up.
You know, once Swaggy P is back, I'm sure they'll be in good shape. He's a key player for them. Good old Swaggy.
That is cruel, dude. And didn't he name himself?
He did, and the best part about that nickname is apparently the origin is unknown publicly. He knows it himself, but he will apparently reveal it in the future at an unknown time. That just increases the legend in my mind.
Do you know that Dr. J's nickname came from the fact that one of his teammates, when he was like on the basketball court, just said he had like so many different moves. It was like the doctor prescribing pills. So there you go. Read the Dr. J autobiography. It's fantastic. Nothing to do with small sample size, just a fun book. Now, that pretty much sums up the small sample size stuff. I did have a few just other stories that have obviously come up that I wanted to talk a little bit about. The Cavaliers right now, and I believe they're playing tonight. I don't know if that game against Utah has started. Hopefully they win that in a rout. That Utah team is not very good. And LeBron James, oh, holy cow. Currently, the Utah Jazz are up by 4 points against the Cavaliers. So if they don't pick it up, the narrative of this subpar, team could keep going. LeBron is having an okay game, but for LeBron, not a good game. And geez, Kevin Love, even for Kevin Love, isn't doing good. He's only got 7 rebounds and only 13 points. So holy cow, this may turn into a bad game for this narrative that I'm about to talk even more, which is the Cavaliers are off to a really poor start. And as fun as that is to talk about and overreact to, the reality is it wasn't as bad, but the Miami Heat, when they first got LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh, also didn't start that good. People don't remember this, but at one point, Spoelstra was in danger of being fired. And this is just, when we talk small sample size, this team's going to get better. You can't expect, unless we find out that Kevin Love or LeBron James is injured, you cannot honestly expect this team to keep up playing this poorly for them, right? LeBron James and Kevin Love are not going to combine from 9 for 25 shooting the whole season. That's just not going to happen. So that'll calm down. And, that actually is one of the areas of small sample size theater where I'll just say, the takeaway being from Klay Thompson, the takeaway is his shot selection, if it improves, he can be better. And he won't be as good as he is right now, but he can move towards something better. On the Cavaliers, it's the same thing. We can say if Kevin Love and LeBron James keep playing this horribly, they're not going to be good. Well, yeah, that's true. But guess what? The reality is that's just not going to happen, likely. One thing we should be a little worried about looking at this game is Sean Marion had a really subpar game. This team does have some old players, Sean Marion, Mike Miller, Ray Allen. They're older, more beat up players. So that we can maybe worry a little bit about.
I'm not worried about Sean Marion at all. He's having a good season so far. I think the Cavs are awesome.
All right, fair enough.
I love
We'll
him.
see. they go 1-3 with a loss to Utah, man, it may be hard for me to keep telling. I came into the show, as you know, pre-show we were talking about this. I was like, now calm down. They're fine, they're fine. And now I'm like, they're losing to Utah. I'm like, well, maybe you should worry, Cleveland fans. Maybe Cleveland is just not allowed to have nice things, I guess.
Maybe I'm just happy to see our local guy from the East Bay here, St. Mary's College, Matthew Della Vedova, getting some run for the Cavs. David Blatt, the international influence, maybe getting in there. I don't know.
All right. The other point, and I tweeted this right before the show. I was really proud. I said maybe they should rename Oklahoma City to Injury City. And yeah, and I think Rose is injured again, and Westbrook went down with injury. All I want to say on this about this is, we talk small sample size, the flip side being trying to make large scale projections. Minutes are really hard in the NBA and injuries matter a lot. And it's just one of those things where you can never know ahead of time. You can know why they matter. Like I said, when you're pointing at small sample size and saying, this thing is really important, this is why they won or lost the game, it's very easy to point at injuries and say the reason they're not doing as well as this key player is not playing. But the problem is you have absolutely no way of knowing that. So it's kind of not the most exciting thing to end our fun, exciting, small sample size theater on, but it's the other side, which is to say sometimes trying to make really long, broad, educated guesses is also about as not fun because you just can't know stuff that's going to matter. All right, so Brian, I'm actually just going to head us into shout outs. Klay Thompson took a lion's share of the minutes for today's podcast, but that fits with his MO. I'm okay with that. And as I mentioned, even as much as it seems like I'm a Kobe hater and a Lakers hater, I just can't talk too much about them when they're down. It's not exciting. And that's, as I mentioned, the problem with the NBA. They want an exciting Lakers team that everybody, love them or hate them, is talking about. No one wants to talk about a bad team.
High usage segments on the show, I guess. That's all I can say.
I like it. Klay Thompson, high usage player, high usage segments. Heck yeah. All right, so that's going to lead us into shout outs. And you actually had a ton. Oh my goodness, by the way, I'm looking at one of your shout outs. I can't believe we didn't bring this up. Another just key small sample size story is Ariza in Houston so far is looking to be the real deal. This is how you use small sample size theater and where people are allowed to get mad at you. It's when you say, I totally told you Ariza was going to be amazing. These 3 games validate all of my claims. So I don't want to do that. All I'm saying is thus far, Ariza's doing well in Houston. I really hope he keeps it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Through 3 games, I think, is when we saw the stat here. I'm showing a tweet that's on Reddit, actually. This is from Brian Mears. We'll try to give him some credit. I don't know who he is, actually. But anyway, his point is, yeah, he had 69 points, 0 mid-range points, all layups and threes. That's the tweet. Guess Daryl Morey's putting his money where his mouth is.
I should have worn the Morey ball. Oh man, I'm not wearing one of my famous Boxscore Geeks t-shirts, so that's a shame. All right. But with that said, let's go into shoutouts. I actually stole one of yours, which will be your second. Or why don't you start with that? Was that what you just did, the Reddit? So that was you said
That's
it was
right,
mine?
yeah.
And who was that again? Let's just get the name.
Brian Mears. Brian with a Y.
Okay, so Brian Mears is shout out number 1. I love your
He's
shout
Brian
out.
_Mears on Twitter.
Okay.
MEARS.
I will be following him right after the show. Your second shout out has me chuckling. Has me chuckling a lot. So I want you to get that up and then talk about that.
Yeah, it's up right now. This is from yesterday, so 2 days probably before we put the show up on the site.
I'm
the
watching
Kings
it right.
and Nuggets triple flop.
Great. Sorry. I don't mean to
I'm a sucker for flops. There is the running Kevin Durant flop last year, I think, was my favorite. So this is the early favorite for 2014-2015 best flop of the year in my book.
Can I just say this? DeMarcus Cousins is just not as good as a flopper as either Fareed or Gay. And Fareed, by the way, he totally, like, this is professional wrestling. Like, Fareed sells it. Like, you watch both Fareed and Cousins, they both, like, go back and do this with their arms. But Cousins doesn't even sell it at all, right? Doesn't even look like he's hurt. In fact, the first thing he does is he, like, looks around to see if the ref saw him. Like, it's like a little kid who gets hurt and is hoping they can cry and get candy or something. But, Rudy Gay and Fareed both fall down. Fareed, sells it much better. So I guess to his credit, Fareed is
Fareed even tries to grab Gay on the way down. You see that?
Wait, I'm watching right now.
Yeah,
it's hard to say because Lawson's in the way, but yeah, you're right.
I'll look at it even differently. Maybe Cousins is on a whole nother level. Maybe he's figured out how to flop and show the refs he's flopping, but still maybe be in a position to make a play. if it doesn't get called. See what I'm saying? We need
I
to call
do.
Coach Nick on this. This could be the next big strategy.
All right. And by the way, fun note for this show, I tried to get a timer from Google, which is awesome. One annoying part is it is now going off and I can't hear it. So the Google timer is nice, but make sure you turn the sound off. You're going to use it for show times. So we're at just about 45 minutes. That's your shout outs. I'm going to give mine. So the first shout out I want to give is to Justin Halpern over on the Short Corner podcast. I'm not going to lie, in the off season, even doing a weekly basketball podcast, my podcast listening to basketball shows went down. But the Short Corner podcast, now that the NBA season's back in full swing, it's just a must listen to any NBA fan. It's one of my favorites. And Justin Halpern made a comparison for Kobe. He said, this is Kobe's Kobayashi Maru, which for those of you who know Star Trek, it's the unwinnable test they give to Starfleet captains to see how they handle unacceptable failure. And this is Kobe's season, and that's totally true. I thought it was the most hilarious comparison ever. And then on Twitter, I asked him about it, and I said, well, can you, if it's his Kobayashi Maru, can you call it his Kobe Ashimaru? And he said, absolutely. So I thought that anytime you can use a pun and make a Star Trek reference, you've just won. And then the other one is Presidente88 on Twitter. I'm going to give a little Twitter knowledge. When you respond to someone, if you don't put a dot or a quote in front of your tweet, only people that follow both you and that person can see the tweet. And this tweet was just great. So I would have, I think he got retweeted a few times, but I would, don't do that. Don't just reply unless you want only that person to see it. But he said, correct me if I'm wrong, in the 2010 finals, the first 4 games, Powell was 40 for 60 in terms of field goals, and Kobe Bryant was 40 for 120. Guess who got the MVP? So as we mentioned this morning, we were piling on the Kobe hate. Not LeBron James. Arturo made some good Kobe comments, and that was just a great comment that I loved. And again, when we want to talk Kobe being overpaid, Kobe being overrated, all those shot things are completely valid. When we talk about Kobe the player trying to get paid, I'm 100% behind it. So those are my shout outs. That's this week's show. Brian, we'll have to think of a fun poll for this week's show. I'll let you get the final word, and then I'll talk us out.
Now, my only final word is I think it would be hilarious if Kobe was actually a huge analytics guy, in the background, and he actually figured all this out, yay points, years ago, and actually ghost wrote Basketball on Paper for Dean Oliver, and he's just trolling us all this time, making money off yay points. That's my conspiracy theory for the week.
Last point is the amazing, because by the way, I've said that about Melo. Melo, it looks like Melo read Wages of Wins and has just done everything according, right? Melo is gone.
Yeah.
I made the Final Four. I better hop to the draft. I'm going to get a max contract. I'm going to go to a big market. I'm going to shoot a lot, But that Kobe Bryant ghost wrote Basketball on Paper may be the best conspiracy theory I have ever heard, ever.
Just think about it.
And then it would make sense why the usage curve is in there. So even then he's like, wait a minute, I need to add this usage curve part, so I justify. Oh, wow, you're blowing my mind, dude.
I mean, I may have just thought this up now, or maybe I did ahead of time. Who knows? We'll just pretend.
It doesn't matter. It's amazing. Whatever. That was a clutch shot. I don't care what the justifications. That's amazing. I'm not going to be able to top that. One thing to just say to everybody listening, we need to get some outro music. We have good suggestions. Let us know. But with that, we'll see you next week.